There we go. Okay. Well, welcome. I'm going to take just a minute to tell you a little bit about what Courage to Caregivers does to support family caregivers. We are a nonprofit located in Northeast Ohio with the mission to provide hope, support, and courage to caregivers and loved ones of those living with mental illness. We focus exclusively on the caregiver and see ourselves in the caregiver burnout prevention business. We offer 3 programs currently at no cost to the participant. All programs are now virtual. We are now supporting caregivers nationwide. We do this through these 3 programs: one-to-one caregiver peer support, which matches caregivers in need with trained volunteers who have experience caring for someone living with mental illness. We have our weekly support groups, and they're co-facilitated by a licensed social worker or counselor and a trained peer specialist. Our support group model provides essential tools to build a caregiver's resilience. We're staffed by professional therapists, but we don't provide therapy or counseling. So our sessions are more like coaching sessions. We have breathing meditation groups, and our facilitators are credentialed yoga instructors that incorporate breathing techniques, light yoga movements, guided meditation, and a big, juicy, deep rest called Yoga Nidra. So we're joined tonight by our partners from Families for Depression Awareness. And I'm going to introduce Susan, and don't worry, I will unmute you, Susan, and she'll give a agency description after I introduce her. So welcome to Susan Weinstein. She is the co-executive director of Families for Depression Awareness. She's been primarily responsible for programs and finances there since 2012. Susan was diagnosed with depression in her teens and has drawn from her personal experiences to inform FFDA's curriculum. She has worked in nonprofits and local government throughout her career, generally in a non-legal capacity. She holds several volunteer positions, including serving on the executive committee and as governance committee chair of the Massachusetts Coalition for Suicide Prevention, and holding elected and appointed seats in her town government since 1992. A native of South Florida, Susan is a graduate of Wellesley College and the Boston University School of Law. So I'm gonna ask you to unmute. Hopefully you're getting that. Yes, excellent. Go ahead.
It's like, can you hear me now? I'm so thrilled to be here, and thank you so much to Courage to Caregivers and Jenny and Christy and the team for bringing us in. Families for Depression Awareness, we help families recognize and cope with depression and bipolar disorder to get people well and prevent suicides. We focus on family caregivers of people living with depression or bipolar disorder because we see them as key in family wellness and suicide prevention. To me, family caregivers are often the first to notice that there's a problem. They're going to be motivated to do something about it, and they're usually in a position to marshal the resources to deal with it. So we want family caregivers to feel equipped and confident in supporting their loved ones on the path to mental wellness. And it's our 20th year.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd also like to introduce Karen and Natalie, who have volunteered their time to be here with us this evening. And we're super grateful to have you here and grateful for Families for Depression Awareness for connecting us with you. Karen is the mother of 3. She grew up in Cleveland. Whoop, whoop. She's lived in Ithaca, New York, and Columbus, Ohio, and she currently resides in Southern Maryland with her fiance. The majority of her career was spent as a secretary and office manager. She's worked as an instructional assistant at a high school in Maryland since 2016. Karen enjoys going to the gym, bike riding, gardening, cooking, reading, and photography, as well as spending as much time as possible with her children, which is difficult because they all live in different states. And welcome, Karen. Also, welcome, Natalie. Natalie has spent the majority of her professional career in marketing and sales and is currently in the role of business engagement specialist for the BBB of Central Ohio. However, her passion is advocating for mental health. Natalie has lived experience with bipolar disorder and has been involved with FFDA since the beginning of 2019. She aims to squash the stigma surrounding mental health by sharing as much of her story as possible. Excellent. Thank you so much for being here, Natalie. So I'm going to admit another folk, and then we are going to get going. Okay. Well, we're going to start with Natalie. So Natalie, I'm hoping you can help answer what are some common misconceptions about bipolar disorder? And I'm going to ask you to unmute, so hopefully that'll help. Do you see something that popped up?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Great.
Perfect. I think a common misconception is that you can't live a typical life and accomplish things like people who are not diagnosed. Yeah, it's true that when you go through a manic episode or a depressive episode or a mixed episode, you gotta be thrown for a loop, but you don't have to be derailed. I think that's definitely a common misconception. Another thing I would say is that it doesn't define who you are. I'm someone who has bipolar. I'm not bipolar, just like someone who has diabetes wouldn't say I am diabetes. I think that's another common misconception.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What about other panelists? What do you think, especially someone who's been working with folks with mental illness and someone who's been a caregiver for people with mental illness? Tell me more about what misconceptions you have heard about bipolar disorder.
One is that people are always either manic or depressed, and that's just not true. If someone is doing that all the time, then there's something not going right with their treatment and they should check in with their provider. Another thing is that bipolar disorder can't be cured, but it can be managed. And so one of the issues that people have is that people with bipolar disorder, they start to feel well because their medication is working, and then they don't want to be on the medication, but that's what can cause a setback. And so even though it can't be cured, it really can be managed, but you have to stay on top of it and get regular sleep and get exercise and control your stress. Those are the real keys.
Okay, great, thank you. Karen, do you have anything to add?
No, I really like what Natalie said in terms of you're not your disorder. I mean, she's proven that over and over many times, because she's had, in the 15, 16 years that she's been diagnosed, she's had a lot of setbacks, but she always comes back stronger. And I see her advocacy work getting more and more. You know, she's done one thing and now she's done 3 things and now she's doing 5 things. And I think that has really helped as she's gotten older as well. I think that she sees that she can be a benefit to other people.
Oh, yeah, excellent, thank you.
And I think just one more misconception is that there is no role for family members in supporting someone who has bipolar disorder, and that's just really not true. I mean, it can be difficult sometimes, and we'll talk about that. But having a relationship of respect and trust and understanding about ways that you can support your loved one, keeping the lines of communication open, that you can really help them support them in getting the care that they need and deserve.
Excellent. Great. Okay. So Karen, this is a question directed towards you. And again, I'll ask all the panelists if they have anything to add after each person. So Karen, what have you learned about helping Natalie? So what do you think you're doing different now as opposed to 15 or 16 years ago when she was first diagnosed that's changed? Tell me about that experience.
Right. So I think for us, and I'll say we because it was my husband and I and 2 other siblings. So it was us as a family dealing with it. So if you don't mind, I will speak as we as opposed to I. So at first, because she was a minor, we knew nothing about this disorder. We had to learn it along with her. What she was going through, we had to learn from the doctors and the nurses and anyone we could reach out to. What do we do? And you kind of do what they say because you don't know anything. So I think in the very early stages, it was about us learning as much as we can about the disorder. Not only what we could do, but what she could do for herself. And Natalie has always been a very good advocate for herself in terms of finding out, what she can do. Is it coloring in a book? Is it writing poetry? Is it reaching out to someone? They always have like kind of an action plan. And I think as she got older, as we, her family, obviously were there to help her, but she had to learn on her own what she needed to do to stay healthy. Sometimes that it worked and other times it didn't. But she's learned along the way. So we've been able to say, okay, what do you need from us? You know, so as the years went on, it was like, speaking to her when she's healthy, what do you need for us to do when you're feeling either manic or depressive? What do you need from us? And get that directly from her. And I think that's where it's changed. Whereas us almost doing everything for her in the beginning, now she's letting us know what she needs. And obviously still being there as a supportive, you know, we'll help you get through whatever we have to. Because that's, as a family, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, it seems, as we talk about this in support groups sometimes, that you moved kind of from a parenting role to more of a coaching role of how can I help you? What do you need? And how can I help you get there? Excellent. Who else has input, especially Natalie? I mean, you know, you've been on this ride, of course, with your mom. So feel free to let us know how has that changed for you, the way your family and your mom has supported you during this period? Oh. Sorry, maybe just stay. I'll click it again. Whoop.
Bro.
That's not what we expected. Okay, hopefully she'll be able to get back on here in just a minute. Well, I will move on.
Well, I can fill it for just a second.
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
And that is just to say that, you know, we need to recognize that people grow and change.
Mhm.
And we need to adjust, and we need to recognize that strategies that were effective at one time may not be effective another time. They might be effective another time again. So just having that flexibility to be able to, manage your own emotions, manage your communication, knowing when you need to walk away, things like that. But being there in the way that the person says they need.
Right.
No.
And I found even just within, like, say, a depressive episode, say Natalie would be very receptive. You know, we'd be sitting there talking, and then I would say, okay, why don't we try to bring out your coloring book and just do some coloring, and you know, like, she'd say okay, and she'd do it for maybe a minute, and it's like, okay, I'm done with that now. So that's okay, let's just sit here. So it was going with the change. Just, if they just need to sit and be quiet, just sit and be quiet.
Mhm.
If they need to cry, let them cry. I mean, that's really what it is, you know, taking your cues from them, as well as giving suggestions, but it does change rapidly. Yeah.
Well, have you been able to handle those rapid changes, Karen? Personally, as a caregiver?
Yeah. I mean, faith is huge, you know, for me. I really do believe that this was the hand Natalie was dealt, as well as us as her family. We're blessed that she's still here, honestly. And that's all I can do is turn to faith and say, you know, please keep her safe. Please, you know, help me to help her. But that's really all I can do. I mean, it's honestly all I can do, besides getting her doctors help, you know, getting what she needs, but also just relying on faith.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for letting me throw that question in there too.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, well, I'm gonna just move forward. Hopefully, yeah, right. Hopefully we will see Natalie again soon. And this question actually is for you, Karen. And this was submitted directly from an audience member, and I didn't change the eyes, so you'll see.
Okay.
I feel that in my caregiving situation, any natural consequence for my loved one will result in more drama and emergencies for me. For example, I will be dealing with the fallout if he loses housing or declares bankruptcy or whatever those things. Suggestions for this person, and I'm sure, Susan, you might have some too, but Karen, go ahead.
Yeah. It's happened. Gosh. At first, again, I'll go back to when she was younger. We'd always, and I will say in this case, I always picked her up. If there were bills that needed to be paid because she was in a manic episode, I took care of it, knowing that she was not in her right state of mind. That happened frequently. As she did get older, it was brought to my attention that I need to stop doing that, it's bailing her out. And so then it became the fine line. Well, you love your child, you want to help them in any way you can, but when do you have to say, I can't do this anymore? And it did come to that point where I said, no, you do have a mental disorder. You know the things you need to do to stay healthy, which is what Susan touched on, which to me is always exercise, food, and sleep. And your medicines, of course. That's what you need to do. If you choose to go off your meds, that you're making a choice. So I'm making the choice not to bail you out. So again, that was a hard thing to learn, but she was homeless several times. She was in very, very bad situations several times, but we couldn't step in. We couldn't keep her in a little bubble and said, everything's going to be all right. Everything is going to be all right, but you're going to have to suffer some consequences, unfortunately. And she knows that. She understands that. It's hard. It's really hard to do, but to me as a caregiver, you have to say, you know what you need to do. I know what I need to do. Let's go. if that makes any sense at all.
That makes sense. Thank you. Susan.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think that, we could sit and talk about it, and we can't imagine how awful it feels if we haven't been there to have to make those kinds of decisions. So I think it's really, really important for you to have support around you, because it's likely you'll be second guessing yourself, you'll be feeling guilty. There's a whole lot of things, but it's so important to protect yourself and to have boundaries and to make some lines that, you can't necessarily foresee all of them, but be mindful of yourself and how you're feeling. And, if you're feeling like you're being taken advantage of, a boundary has been crossed. If you're feeling resentful, a boundary has been crossed. And so I think you need to make sure you listen to yourself, and try and feel what your body needs, because you're the one who's going to have to take care of you. But I have had lots of situations where I've talked with people and they've come to the point where they need to step back and let the chips fall where they may. And, my heart goes out to them every single time, because it's just really, really hard. You don't want that for your kid. But as Karen was saying, they need to be accountable for themselves. If they're making choices, then there are results of those choices.
Yeah.
And it's hard because it's a mental disorder. It was by no choice of their own. Whereas some other things out in the world, are, you're making the choice to drink or to do drugs. Bipolar disorder or any mental disorder is not something you choose. But again, you do have the capability of doing helpful things for yourself as opposed to harmful things. So again, like as the caregiver, I think you have to give that person credit almost, to talk to them when they are feeling well and to say, we want you to remain healthy, but there are going to be consequences. If you don't listen to us when we say we think you're manic, you need to go talk to your doctor or be hospitalized, you need to listen to us at that point. And again, that's whether they're going to do it or not. Different story.
Yeah, it is.
But that's all you can do. You have to give them they have the tools, and then you're giving them more tools, and you're giving them your support. But yeah, you can't keep them in a bubble, and you can't, as an adult, tell them what to do or not to do.
And I think that whether it's your parent, your spouse, or your child, you still have the right and the need to have your own boundaries. And it can be a horrible situation where you need to take the kids and go somewhere else while your spouse is not managing their disorder. But you hope that you have the strategies in place and the communication in place that you can avoid that. But it's not always possible.
Yep.
And sometimes I have heard this, that people really have to hit rock bottom before they will, take charge of their lives again.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, unfortunately, Natalie will not be able to rejoin, but we're gonna move forward without her, and hopefully we'll be able to do some of her questions justice, because the next one we kind of slated for her, and I'll put it out there to the two of you, and if you feel like you can answer it, feel free. So, how do you help support someone as they start the treatment journey, especially if they don't see the need for treatment or support? So those newly diagnosed, or any ideas on that? How do you help support that?
At Families for Depression Awareness, we rely on the stages of change model, which in a nutshell says people aren't going to do anything until they're ready to do it. And there are things that you can do as a caregiver in anticipation of that, and in making observations and things like that. But forcing someone into treatment doesn't help anything, because they're not going to buy in, and it's not going to work. And then it's just going to be alienation and frustration. And caregivers have dashed expectations, and the people living with the condition, their loved ones, have anger and resentment. So I'd urge people to take a look at the stages of change videos that we have, and you could see sort of where you are, where your loved one is, because you may be at action and they're not even at contemplation yet. So we think it's useful for people trying to sort of pace themselves as they go through this, but it's frustrating.
Yeah, thank you. And just as a reminder, we'll send a follow-up email, and these videos are on their websites. They're quite good. Feel free. Oh no.
Hey Jenny, how you doing?
Hey, good. Any other way that you would like to answer? Oh, wait, there you are. For some reason, you just got unspotlighted. Oh, Zoom.
Unmute again.
And now I'm going to ask you to unmute. So we can't hear you yet, Karen. Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
So with Natalie, because she was 15, the first and second time she was hospitalized, she was 15. So obviously, she was in the hospital, so we were in care of her. So that was easy, because then she had her doctor appointments and everything like that.
Oops. Oh.
But then it gets harder when they become adults.
Yes, I know she's still here.
But nonetheless, I mean, it doesn't matter if someone is 15 or someone is 45. If they're not interested in being treated, or they don't see the need for it, it's pushing a rock up a hill. Not very productive.
Go ahead and try to unmute again, Karen. I don't what's happening with that. It's odd. You're still muted though. There you are. Oh, goodness. Well, why does this keep happening? So weird. Well, Karen, go ahead and give one more time at trying to add to more of this question. Otherwise, we'll move on to a Susan question.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Whoops, there you don't go. You hit it again.
So,
There you
nope,
go.
there we go.
Don't touch
Okay, good.
anything.
So what I was saying was Natalie as a minor and that her first several times in the hospital, I almost forgot what the question was. I'm so sorry.
When a young person doesn't want to.
So we had, the doctors were lined up. So in the hospital, they said, we want you to go to this doctor, and then it's set up. So that was easy for us at that point. I would say if she was more diagnosed when she was like maybe 23 and 24, and I'm sure at the hospital they would say, here, go see this person. But just at that young age of 15, I think that made it less overwhelming in terms of what we would do after she got out of the hospital, because it was all set up for you. So that was very nice. Now, as the years gone on, obviously her insurance situation changed, depended on jobs. Sometimes she didn't have insurance at all. So that, was a big thing. So you just dealt with it each time. So whatever's thrown at you, you deal with it. And that's just how we've always done it. You deal with it the best you can. There's no use getting frustrated. You're going to find someone that she's going to talk to, whether the psychiatrist and the psychologist and support groups and things like that. So you're going to find people to help.
And I think that even if it's a young adult, as the question asked, it helps, I think, to have the mindset of making decisions with them, not for them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you approach it that way, and you have a sense of timeline, like what you can expect in terms of people coming to these decisions, I think it makes it easier. And certainly less confrontational or, less butting heads about it.
Yeah. And I think we've been very lucky that Natalie, it seems like she's always been a big advocate for herself, and then myself as an advocate for her. And so it was always kind of for us, she had ideas, I had ideas, so it's almost like we worked together. Sometimes she wasn't as receptive as other times, but for the most part, she's been very good about dealing with finding out what to do that's going to help her.
Great. Okay, let's see. So I was curious. So through our own programming at Courage to Caregivers, we really encourage self-care. So even micro self-care. We do this so we can try to support caregivers so they don't get burnout. This is burnout prevention. Susan, is there advice you can give on self-care planning? I'm sure you guys have to talk about this as well at Families for Depression for Awareness. Tell me more about what advice you give on self-care planning.
Okay, absolutely. I was thinking that the analogy that we often use is that you can't drive on an empty tank. But given the situation with the Colonial Pipeline, I don't want to cause anybody more stress. So can't pour from an empty cup. There you go. But you have to be deliberate about it. You need to recognize that it's something that's essential for your own well-being. You can't be helping others if you are depleted. So to us, it's a deliberate activity or practice or ritual, or exercise or whatever it is that is meant to replenish you in some way, to nourish you. Think about your soul. What does your soul need? and pay attention to that. Self-care, as with the strategies I was talking about earlier, there are different strategies that are going to work for different situations, different times of day, but knowing that you have a range of options to choose from is very helpful. So if you're really, really sad about something, it might be very helpful to call a friend and, share with them, receive their support. But if you're really angry about something, it's probably not fair to your friend to call them. So maybe you need to do something physical for that. So we tried to encourage people to match the strategy with the emotion.
Smart.
So journaling is good for some things and some people are not for others. And singing is good for some people for some things and not for others. But also think about yourself as a whole person. Think about the dimensions of you. So there's your mental health part that you can do things to control your stress. You can get, we refer to it as SEAM, SEM, for sleep, exercise, eating, and meditation. No, mindfulness, sorry. Some M, pick an M. That those are sort of like the fundamental building blocks. And for a lot of people, it's just C. They're not, they don't know so much about mindfulness, or they, it can be practiced in many ways. And I think that that's something that you guys do. But it doesn't matter if the self-care is boring or exciting or active or relaxing. It's whatever you need. And you just need to try and be in touch with yourself. But, what does your body need physically? What do you need spiritually? What do you need professionally? What do you need personally? You want to let yourself be a whole person. And I think that that's, it can feel like a lot, but just do one thing. And then if that isn't working, try something else. And if that is working, then try something else too. So
you got to have a plan. For sure. Yeah. Karen, I loved reading your bio because you have a lot of interesting hobbies. Are those your self-care too? Or are there other things?
I didn't have volunteer in there.
Yeah.
I volunteer too.
Perfect. Yeah. So what do you do for self-care?
I'm sorry?
Said, what do you do for self-care?
Exercise every day. Eat right. I sleep pretty good. And I'll, just working, volunteering, gardening, reading, photography, just being outside. I like being outside.
Excellent.
So that's self-care to me is just all of that.
And those are the things that nourish you.
Yes. Yep. And talk to my kids, of course.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
So this was a Natalie question, and I'm not sure whether we'll be able to do it justice, but let's give it a shot, because I know this was submitted by the audience as well. So what kind of support do you find helpful when you're experiencing symptoms? So what helps you the most when you're manic? What helps you the most when you're depressed? Anyone able to speak to that? Can be challenging since we don't have her here. But.
I'll kind of speak to her just because I've experienced it with her. So when she's manic, I found that there's nothing you can do because she doesn't think she's manic. She thinks she's fine.
See some nods out there. Yeah.
Yes. And so at that point, it's very hard because, again, there's nothing wrong with her. She gets to, and what I've seen as she's grown older, so probably about the time she was 25, 26, I noticed that she started saying, I need to go to the hospital. And she'd say, because I know what comes after this, which is the depression and the suicide attempts. And she would say, I don't want to get to that point. So she'd go through the manic episode again, thinking she was okay, but then just one day it would be, oh, okay, now I think I need to go to the hospital. So that has gotten better. It doesn't mean it still doesn't happen. It still happens, So during her manic phases, I would say there was nothing you could say to her. And that was just the way it is. And then during depression, it's more, she's got to get lifted out of that. And usually that means a medicine change, a hospitalization and a medicine change. It takes sometimes weeks for that medicine, the new medicine, to kick in. So in the meantime, then you're just there supporting her. And again, that could be just sitting and holding her. It could just be sitting across the room from her. It could be talking if she feels like it, crying, because she a lot of times will just cry nonstop. And so then you just have to be there. I mean, the biggest thing is just being there. So I think for the manic, it's really can't do anything. She has to come to that realization. Depression, definitely just be there, support her, know that, telling her that we love her and we'll do anything we can to help her. And then she slowly lifts out of that. And sometimes it is, like I said, it's slow. I used to say that she lost 2 months out of every year, from the time she was 15 till probably 27, 28. And again, now in the more recent times when she's hospitalized, it could be 4 weeks, it could be 6 weeks where she's not quite right. But 2 months, I mean, I literally would say 2 months out of every year of her life, she lost just from being ill. But yeah, that's that.
Susan, in your work with families, any input to this question?
I think that having the conversations when someone is well is helpful, because then you could share expectations and you could say, oh, you told me when we talked about this, you told me that you wanted me to do this. You can also have it in writing. You wanted us to do this to help you. But knowing what their priorities are for treatment, what their preferences are for treatment, what their treatment goals are, that can help you in supporting them to work toward those, even if they're not necessarily focused on it at this time. You could say, well, when we talked, you said that you didn't want to have a medication that caused you to be sleepy. And so let's ask the doctor about that. Whatever you could do to support them in getting the things that they would have gotten if they were able to articulate it at that time. And if it's, there are lots of ways you can support someone who's in a depressive episode and like when they're depressed. I think being there is really important. Making sure they're safe is important. I think those are probably the key things. But listening to them, like really listening to them, and don't put your own thoughts on top of it, and don't assume you know what they want.
Yeah.
And again, with not for.
Yeah. And that is a big thing that Natalie, as she has aged, has been able to say, for us to have that conversation of, okay, when you're starting to feel manic, can you tell? And she'll say no. And it's like, well, what if we come to you and say, yeah, we're noticing that you're not sleeping well. And she goes, well, then maybe just tell me that you think there's something wrong. And it's like, okay, we have. And she goes, well, maybe if 3 people tell me that, I'm seeming kind of manic, maybe that will help. And it's like, maybe. So at least we've had that conversation now where she is telling us, what can we do when we're noticing her either in a depressive or manic episode? She's able to say, yeah, do this for me or do that for me, which again, to me, it is great because you kind of, especially as a mother, you do what comes naturally, which is to nurture and that sort of thing. But it's so nice for her or anyone in that situation to be able to say, hey, yeah, when I'm acting like this, can you tell me, or how do I want to say it? Can you lead me in the right direction to get help, number one, and things like that. So I think that is very important that you have those conversations with them when they are feeling well. And again, when they're in the middle of an episode, they're not necessarily going to listen to you or take it in because they literally can't. But you've had the conversation and you're trying. I think that's a big thing.
Comes back to planning when well, it sounds like, for sure, and having hard conversations.
Yep.
Okay, just a few more questions here. I wonder if either of you can speak about finding an appropriate psychiatrist, any therapist. Talk to me about your experiences with that, or advice you have for folks that are looking for a medical practitioner to work with someone with bipolar disorder.
Yeah, we always did it just through insurance.
Okay.
And so you're limited who you could see. It may be that we went to one person and Natalie didn't feel a rapport with them. So then you'd try to get a recommendation for someone else. And really, unless you're self-pay, you're going to have to deal with whoever insurance is telling you can deal with. So that's unfortunate because I think Natalie has been underserved by people throughout this past 16, 17 years. But I mean, our hands were tied. I mean, we couldn't self-pay. And so you did, but you tried to find the best people that you could.
Okay.
And sometimes it's not even necessarily the best people, it's the best people for her.
For her, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
the best fit. Right.
Right, exactly. And within what's available. I think that now with mental health, people's options are getting broader. But it's, as with so many things, it's kind of trial and error and timing. Sometimes you'll call and they don't have they're not taking new patients sometimes, but call me back in 2 weeks because maybe I can then, kind of thing. And it's like, can I wait for 2 weeks? Like, how can I get through these 2 weeks? But I think as a caregiver, knowing the kinds of things that your loved one would want in a provider makes it easier in a sense, because it helps to narrow it down some. Like if they absolutely will not do well with a man as their psychiatrist, then not to look at men's psychiatrists. Or if it comes to that's all that's available, then you could say, I did this really exhaustive search and I just can't find anyone. Let's give him a try, kind of thing. So, but again, supporting them in getting the treatment that they want.
Okay. So I have one more question from our list here. How do you deal with barriers in communication due to patient privacy policies, such as HIPAA? And I guess we're talking about adults here. And again, you've had Natalie was under 18 when she was diagnosed and is still living with this disorder as an adult. So maybe you could speak to that first about your experiences with dealing with privacy policies.
Sure. So as a minor, we as her parents were the ones who had the ability to speak to her doctors and her team. Then I don't know if it was 18 or 21, I think it was 18, where she would have to sign the privacy policy to say who who the doctors could talk to. And again, she was always very willing. She fortunately always wanted us to be a part of it. So, she'd put me and my husband's name down, and, we were the ones who received the information and were there for the team meetings if she was hospitalized and things like that. And then even as she got older, she still would put me mostly as the contact. So then I could disseminate information to the rest of the family. But now she's married, and she has her husband down as the contact. But for us, I think it was okay, because again, she knew she wanted the doctors to talk to someone, and it was us, on her behalf. So she always willingly signed the privacy form, so that they could talk to us. And I know probably in some situations, that doesn't happen. And in that respect, all I could do is ask the caregivers, to talk to their loved one, to say, I want to help you the best I can. And for you to give information, or you to give permission for your team to talk to me, would be helpful for me to be able to help you. So to me, if you as a caregiver can come at it in that way, I would hope that they want you to do that, because to me, you're the one that loves them the most, if that's what you want to say. And just to relay that to them, that I want to be able to help you the best I can.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but again, pre-planning went well. That's it seems like a lot of these issues can be at least broached and worked on before it becomes an issue in some cases. Susan, do you have more to add to?
You betcha.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
I have the misfortune of having gone to law school, but I won't be talking about this as a lawyer. I think one thing we need to recognize at the outset is that your loved one has the right to have boundaries as well. And it's healthy for them to have boundaries. And it's also important for them to have the support of people who care about them. So yes, doing things in advance makes a world of difference. But if they have said that their provider, if they've not given permission for their provider to talk with you, that does not mean that you can't talk to their provider. It may cause some friction or worse when they learn of it. But if you have information that's really important for their provider to know, the provider can listen. Don't expect a conversation, but say, I have information that I think would be relevant. It's up for them to decide if it's relevant or not. But for example, my spouse is expressing suicidal intentions. That would be something that you could relay. If it's a new provider, say, you may not know about our family history. So there are things that you can relay to them that, but don't expect them to answer. So just frame your expectations accordingly.
Okay. I know we have folks on this call, and this is another, I'm going to add this to the list very quickly. We have folks on this call who are supporting spouses, not just children. And I was curious, Karen, and you'll have to unmute again, what the transition of care was like when it went from you to Natalie's spouse, if you can talk about it. Again, I feel so odd talking about her when she's not here, but I know there are people here supporting spouses, and I guess I was just curious if you could speak to how they're managing care now as a couple. Let me try to find you again. There you are. So when you're unmuting, sometimes you're hitting maybe the spotlight. So they're really close to each other. So don't unspotlight yourself, but unmute yourself. Very tricky.
That's what that icon is. Thank you. Learn something new.
Someone had to chat me and tell me. Thanks, Christy. So yeah, keep trying. Oh, Zoom. Nope, still muted. Please don't. There you are again. Let's give it another shot. Just so while we're waiting, one of our expectations of our support groups are being patient with yourself and others with technology.
I would also hope that self-compassion is in there.
Mm-hmm.
There you go, Karen.
Yay.
Hey, now I forgot the question.
I forget it too. Now I'm
No,
just
caring for her as
Oh,
an adult
about-
in the transition
about
to her
the
husband.
transition, right? The transition. I'm going to tell you something. It was a little hard because this just happened recently.
Okay.
I've been so used to being the contact person. So when Natalie was hospitalized recently, and she obviously had her husband on the list, like I had to be on the phone, going, okay, so what's going on? And I don't know, he's totally new to all of this.
Mm.
So I almost felt like he didn't know what he should say to me. Whereas all I want to know, just what are the doctors saying? That's all I really want to know. What are they saying? What is their plan? And I think he was almost afraid to tell me. That's what I kind of got that impression. Like, it's okay. I've been through this. You can tell me. And so I didn't know if he was afraid that Natalie wouldn't want me to know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for him, it was just very confusing.
Got it.
So I kind of had to prompt him and just say, just help me out. Like, is she okay? Are they going to switch up her meds? How long do they think she's going to be in the hospital? So it was different. Again, from going from being the contact person that knew everything to kind of getting it secondhand, that was a little, it was fine because I understand my role is to step back now, and that's fine. I still want to be kept in the loop. But it was okay. It's all right. It's all right.
It seems to me that he could also use your coaching. He doesn't know what
Yes.
to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're
Yes.
new to bipolar
And-
disorder,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of things and you've
Yes,
had it in your life for so long
that's correct.
that there are things that are second nature to you, in terms of the conversations.
Yes. Yes.
So I
What
think that-
things to ask. And I think that's it. Yeah. Here's what you can ask her team, her doctors. Here's what you can do for her. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally agree.
And I think
Yeah.
think it would be great if Natalie was able to convey how much she trusts you to him so that he knows that he
Aw.
can trust you too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the good thing is he's always talked to me. We have a good relationship, so, I'll call him up, he'll call me and say, hey, and a lot of times it's been that he's called me to say, hey, this is what she's doing right now. Do you think that's okay? And what do I do if she does this? So he's very open to learning about it. But I think this was the first time that she was hospitalized, like in his care kind of thing. And I think it just threw him for a loop. I think he was just kind of shell shocked or
I
something.
was going to say, I'm sure it was overwhelming.
Yeah. But he's good. He's good.
This has been great, Jenny.
All right. Well, it is almost 8. So I appreciate all of you for being here, those in our audience and those speaking on our fireside chat tonight. Know that you will, again, receive an email that will follow up this conversation, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks so much for
Thank you,
having us.
Jenny.
Yeah.
Thank you, Susan.
Bye,
Bye.
Karen.